Did you know some of the biggest rock stars have biracial kids? From the Beatles to the Rolling Stones, their family trees are more diverse than you think. Stick around. Number 1 will blow your mind. 20. Robert Plant. What if I told you the frontman of Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest rock bands of all time, has a biracial son who doesn't even play rock music? That's right, Robert Plant's son, Logan Romero Plant, took a completely different path. Robert Plant married Maureen Wilson, a woman of East Indian and English descent at the height of his rock career. Their love story was just as legendary as his music, but few people know that their son Logan inherited more than just his father's creativity. He also embraced his mother's multicultural heritage. But instead of guitars and stadium tours, Logan found success in something unexpected: craft beer. He founded Beavertown Brewery, one of UK's biggest independent breweries. While his dad belts out classics like Stairway to Heaven, Logan is busy creating legendary brews. Robert Plant once joked that while he performs in front of thousands, Logan's stage is a bar counter, where his fans raise their glasses instead of lighters. 19. Roger Waters. Pink Floyd's Roger Waters built The Wall. But what if I told you his own family background is more complex than his iconic lyrics? His son, Jack Fletcher, carries a cultural history that many fans don't know about. Waters, known for his deep and often rebellious music, married Priscilla Phillips, a woman of African American and Native American descent. Their son Jack grew up surrounded by the legacy of one of rock's most politically charged musicians. With that kind of upbringing, you'd expect Jack to be a radical activist or musician, right? Surprisingly, he prefers a quiet life, staying away from the spotlight despite having one of the most famous last names in music. While Waters wrote about rebellion and resistance, his own son embraced peace and privacy. Waters once said, "Music should cross all borders." Little did fans know, that philosophy wasn't just about his art. 18. Phil Lynott.
The girl's a fool, she broke the rules, she heard a lie. This time you will breathe.
What if I told you one of the most iconic rock frontmen of the 70s was actually biracial himself, and later had biracial children of his own? Thin Lizzy's Phil Lynott was a trailblazer in more ways than one. Born to an Irish mother and an Afro-Guyanese father, Lynott shattered barriers as one of the few black rock stars in an era dominated by white musicians. He became a legend with hits like "The Boys Are Back in Town," but behind the music, he was also a devoted father. His daughters, Sarah and Kathleen Lynott, inherited his rich cultural background through their white mother, Caroline Crowther. Lynott often sang about love, freedom, and breaking boundaries, and his family was a true reflection of that spirit. He even wrote Sarah, one of Thin Lizzy's sweetest ballads, as a dedication to his daughter. Sadly, Lynott passed away too soon. 17. Jeff Beck. Most people know Jeff Beck as a guitar god, one of the most technically brilliant players to ever touch the instrument. But did you know his personal life was just as fascinating as his music? Beck, who played with legends like Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page, had a deep love for experimental sounds, and that extended into his personal life. He found love with a woman of mixed heritage, and together they had a daughter, Tal Wilkenfeld. Unlike most rock star kids who ride their parents' fame, Tal forged her own path in the music world, not as a guitarist, but as a bassist. And she didn't just dabble in music, she became a sensation. Tal has played with legends like Prince, Mick Jagger, and even the great Jeff Beck himself. When Beck first saw her perform, he reportedly said, "That's my girl, but she plays like she's from another planet." 16. David Gilmour.
Heaven from hell, blue skies from...
Imagine being the son of a Pink Floyd legend growing up surrounded by rock royalty, yet choosing an entirely different path. That's exactly what happened with David Gilmour's son Gabriel Gilmour, whose heritage carries a fascinating cultural mix. David Gilmour, the voice and guitar behind Comfortably Numb and Wish You Were Here, married Polly Sampson, a celebrated novelist and lyricist with Indian and English roots. Their son Gabriel grew up in a home filled with music, poetry, and storytelling. Despite being raised by one of rock's greatest guitarists, Gabriel decided against following in his father's footsteps. Instead, he found his passion in aviation. While his dad strummed legendary riffs on his Fender Stratocaster, Gabriel was training to fly airplanes. Gilmour once joked that while his son soars through the skies, he prefers staying grounded with his guitar. But one thing's for sure, whether in music or aviation, the Gilmour family always aims high. 15. Paul Simon.
I'm just a poor boy, though my story is so told.
Most people know Paul Simon as half of Simon and Garfunkel, the genius behind Bridge Over Troubled Water. But there's something you probably didn't know. His son Harper Simon carries a rich multicultural background. Simon was married to the legendary actress Carrie Fisher, known for playing Princess Leia in Star Wars. Fisher's heritage includes Russian, Jewish, and English-Irish ancestry, meaning Harper grew up with one of the most culturally diverse lineages in Hollywood and music history. Harper didn't just inherit his father's musical genes, he also got his talent. He became a singer-songwriter, crafting folk and rock albums with a sound eerily similar to his dad's. But unlike Paul Simon's polished pop-folk sound, Harper's music leans more toward indie, raw, and deeply personal. Paul Simon once said, "Every generation needs its own voice." 14. Billy Joel.
Honesty is hardly ever heard.
You know him as the Piano Man, but did you know Billy Joel has a daughter with one of the most famous supermodels in the world? His daughter, Alexa Ray Joel, is the product of two iconic legacies. Billy Joel was married to Christy Brinkley, the legendary model whose face graced magazine covers for decades. With German, Irish, English, and Scottish roots, Brinkley brought a mix of cultures into their family, making Alexa Ray Joel biracial. While her father is one of the greatest songwriters in history, Alexa didn't just ride on his coattails. She developed her own unique voice, soulful, jazzy, and deeply emotional. Unlike Billy's classic rock sound, Alexa's music has a smooth, sultry quality that sets her apart. Billy Joel once said, "She's got more talent than I ever did." Coming from the man who wrote New York State of Mind, that's a huge compliment. Looks like talent truly runs in the family. 13. Rod Stewart.
I still want you by my side.
Rod Stewart's raspy voice is legendary, but here's something most people don't know. His daughter, Ruby Stewart, carries a mix of cultures that makes her background as fascinating as her father's music. Rod had Ruby with model Kelly Emberg, who comes from mixed European descent. While most rock star kids grow up in the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, Ruby was raised with a surprisingly normal childhood. But of course, with a dad like Rod Stewart, music was always around. Ruby initially tried to stay away from the music industry, working as a model like her mother. But eventually, the rock and roll genes kicked in, and she found herself drawn to songwriting. Unlike her dad's rock and pop anthems, Ruby's music leans towards country and Americana, proving that the Stewart legacy can take on different forms. Rod Stewart once said, "I told her she'd find her way back to music, and here we are." Looks like Dad was right. 12. Ozzy Osbourne. The Prince of Darkness, the wildest frontman in metal history, has a daughter with a cultural background as diverse as his music. But unlike her famous family, Amy Osbourne prefers to stay out of the spotlight. Ozzy married Sharon Osbourne, the powerhouse manager and TV personality with Irish and Jewish ancestry. Together they had Amy, Kelly, and Jack Osbourne. While Kelly and Jack became reality TV stars on The Osbournes, Amy rejected fame and chose a quiet life. Unlike her dad, who made his career out of screaming vocals and insane stage antics, like biting the head off of a bat, Amy pursued music in a much different way. She created her own project, Arrow, which has a haunting, alternative electronic sound, nothing like Black Sabbath. Ozzy once admitted he respects her choice to avoid the limelight, but joked, "She's still got the music genes, just without the crazy." 11. Bruce Springsteen.
Toss for my hair, say some, take a good look around.
The Boss is known for his working class anthems. But what if I told you his son chose a path completely different from the blue-collar rock Bruce made famous? Evan Springsteen has a deep-rooted cultural mix, but music wasn't his calling. Bruce married Patti Scialfa, an incredibly talented musician of Italian and Irish descent, making their children part of a rich cultural tapestry. Evan was raised surrounded by music. His parents even performed together on tour. So naturally, everyone expected him to become a musician, right? Wrong. Evan has kept a relatively private life, choosing to focus on his education rather than the stage. While he does love music, he never wanted to live in his father's shadow. Instead, he pursued a career in event management, helping organize massive concerts rather than performing in them. Bruce once joked, "He may not play the guitar, but at least he keeps the show running." Looks like the Boss raised a behind-the-scenes boss. 10. Jerry Lee Lewis.
Catching up with you.
The man who practically invented rock and roll had a larger-than-life personality. But what if I told you his son, Jerry Lee Lewis III, took a completely different route? While his father was setting pianos on fire, literally, he chose a more laid-back life. Jerry Lee Lewis, famous for Great Balls of Fire, was known for his wild antics, controversial personal life, and rebellious music. He married Carrie McCarver, whose mixed heritage added a unique cultural depth to their family. Together, they had Jerry Lee Lewis III. Instead of living in the shadow of his legendary father, Jerry III built a career behind the scenes, staying far away from the wild lifestyle that made his dad famous. While he respects his father's legacy, he prefers to keep his personal life private. Jerry Lee Lewis once said, "You gotta make your own fire, son." Looks like his son took that advice, just without setting pianos ablaze. 9. Tom Jones.
I bless the day I found
You know Tom Jones for his deep, soulful voice and hit songs like It's Not Unusual. But what you probably didn't know is that he has a biracial son who grew up far from the glitz and glamour of his father's world. Back in the 80s, Tom Jones had a brief relationship with model Catherine Berkery, who is of mixed descent. That relationship led to the birth of his son, Jonathan Berkery. But here's where things get complicated. Tom initially denied paternity. It wasn't until years later, after a DNA test, that it was confirmed Jonathan was his son. Despite being the child of a global superstar, Jonathan struggled with his identity and even experienced financial hardship. Unlike his father, he never reached musical stardom, but he did try his hand at singing under the name John Jones. In an interview, Tom Jones once admitted that he regrets how things turned out, saying, I wasn't there and I should have been. 8. George Harrison.
Precious time. It's gonna take patience and time.
The quiet Beatle had a son who inherited not just his musical talent, but also his deep appreciation for culture and spirituality. But here's something most people don't know. Donnie Harrison nearly walked away from music entirely. George Harrison, the legendary guitarist of the Beatles, married Olivia Trinidad Arias, a Mexican-American author and producer. Their son, Donnie Harrison, grew up surrounded by music royalty, but instead of picking up a guitar right away, he chose a different path: industrial design. Donnie initially resisted following in his father's footsteps, believing he could never live up to the Beatles' legacy. But after George's passing in 2001, Donnie had a realization. His father's music was a part of him. He eventually embraced his destiny, becoming a musician in his own right, blending rock with electronic influences. George Harrison once said, "All things must pass." 7. John Lennon.
Don't you know it's gonna last?
What if I told you John Lennon's son, Sean Lennon, didn't just inherit his father's music genes, but also his love for controversy and boundary-pushing art? That's right, Sean is every bit as fearless as his legendary dad. Born to John Lennon and Japanese avant-garde artist Yoko Ono, Sean Lennon grew up with one of the most famous last names in history. While his older half-brother Julian Lennon had a rocky relationship with their father, Sean was raised in a deeply artistic environment surrounded by musicians, poets, and visionaries. Despite the pressure of being John Lennon's son, Sean carved out his own career. His music is experimental, often fusing rock, jazz, and psychedelic influences. He even co-founded a band called The Ghost of a Saber-Toothed Tiger, proving he inherited his dad's love for the weird and wonderful. Lennon once said, "Reality leaves a lot to the imagination." Looking at Sean's career, it's clear he took that philosophy to heart. 6. Robin Thicke.
Time when it's the summertime and all my downtime. Yeah, that's a lot of time.
You know him for Blurred Lines, but what if I told you Robin Thicke comes from a Hollywood meets music legacy? His biracial son, Julian Fuego Thicke, has an even more interesting story behind him. Robin Thicke, a singer-songwriter with smooth R&B vibes, was married to actress Paula Patton, who is of African-American and European descent. Their relationship was full of ups and downs, but one thing remained constant: their son Julian, who inherited the best of both worlds. Growing up in the spotlight wasn't easy for Julian, especially with his parents' high-profile split. But despite the family drama, Robin and Paula have always prioritized raising their son with love and stability. And while Julian is still young, fans wonder if he'll follow his father's musical footsteps. Robin once said, "Music runs in the family, but I just want my son to be happy." 5. David Bowie. Ziggy Stardust himself built a career on reinvention. But did you know his daughter, Alexandria Lexi Jones, prefers a completely different life? Despite being the child of a global icon, Lexi stays out of the public eye. David Bowie married Somali-American supermodel Iman, creating one of the most stunning power couples in entertainment history. Their daughter, Lexi, inherited both her father's artistic spirit and her mother's striking beauty. But unlike Bowie, who thrived in the spotlight, Lexi prefers a low-key life, pursuing art and painting instead of music. Even though she avoids the limelight, she shares an unbreakable bond with her late father. Before Bowie passed in 2016, he would often call Lexi his greatest creation. Now, she honors his legacy in her own way, through visual art rather than performance. Bowie once said, "I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring. 4. Eric Clapton. He's one of the greatest guitarists of all time. But did you know Eric Clapton has a biracial daughter who took a completely different path? While Clapton's life was filled with rock star highs and personal tragedies, his daughter Ruth found her own way. Eric Clapton had Ruth Clapton with Yvonne Kelly, who is of mixed heritage. Unlike her father, Ruth didn't step into the world of rock and roll. Instead, she became a blogger and influencer, focusing on fashion, lifestyle, and family. She shares glimpses of her life through social media, something her ultra-private father rarely did in his prime. Clapton, who famously wrote Tears in Heaven about the tragic loss of his son Connor, has always valued family deeply. Though he keeps his personal life private, he has spoken about how much he treasures being a father. Clapton once said, "Music saved my life, but my children gave it meaning." 3. Mick Jagger. The Rolling Stones frontman is known for his wild lifestyle. But what if I told you one of his daughters is a philanthropist, not a rock star? Meet Karis Jagger, the biracial daughter Mick Jagger had with African-American actress Marsha Hunt. Karis was born during the height of the Stones' fame, but unlike many rock star kids, she stayed far away from the chaotic music scene. Instead of following her father into showbiz, Karis produced a career in humanitarian work and film production. She even helped produce the Netflix documentary High on the Hog, which explores the African-American influence on American cuisine. Despite their rocky past, Mick initially denied paternity. Father and daughter are now incredibly close. Karis is often seen at family events, and she's even credited with keeping Mick grounded after the passing of his longtime partner, Loren Scott. Jagger once said, "You can't always get what you want." But in Karis's case, she found exactly what she needed, her own identity beyond the shadow of a rock legend. 2. Bob Dylan. The legendary Bob Dylan, one of the most influential figures in music history, has a secret that may surprise you. His daughter, Desiree Dennis Dylan, is biracial, but there's more to this family connection than just genetics. Bob Dylan's daughter Desiree was born to his backup singer Carolyn Dennis, a woman of African-American descent. Dylan's personal life was always a bit of a mystery, but this connection to Desiree and her mother was particularly private. The family kept the relationship out of the public eye for years, and it wasn't until Desiree was much older that she publicly acknowledged her connection to one of the world's most iconic musicians. Desiree didn't follow her father's footsteps into music, instead carving out her own path in life. However, the family's musical roots run deep. Desiree's mother, Carolyn, was a talented singer in her own right, which influenced Desiree's early years. Dylan once said, "The songs you write are the stories of your life." 1. Elvis Costello. The crown jewel of this list is none other than Elvis Costello, a rock legend with a fascinating family background that's as colorful as his musical career. Costello's daughter, Dexter Henry Lorcan, is biracial, with her mother, jazz singer Diana Krall, being of European and Indigenous Canadian descent. Elvis Costello, known for his eclectic blend of rock, punk, and new wave, married Diana Krall, a critically acclaimed jazz pianist and singer. Together, they raised their children in a family that thrives on music, culture, and diversity. Dexter, however, took a path that wasn't immediately tied to the spotlight. While Dexter may not have followed in her father's musical footsteps, her upbringing, surrounded by jazz, rock, and classical influences, shaped her unique creative identity. Elvis once said, "Dexter's ability to see the world in so many different ways is her greatest gift, and it's clear that her biracial heritage plays a part in her artistic vision." Thanks for watching. If this list surprised you, drop a comment and let us know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another crazy music fact. Check out our next video. It's even wilder.